All right, well, let's just get the ball rolling. Today you get to hear from a senior writer. She has done a lot over the years for Writers Expo and Slant of Light. She's a fantastic writer. Please welcome Molly Muscato.
Hi everyone, my name is Molly Muscato and I'm a senior here at Libertyville High School. Before I begin, I just want to thank all of the amazing English teachers here at LHS who have supported me as a student and a writer for all 4 of my years here. And here's my poem titled A Reflection. Once I saw a woman wading in the water and she made me think of you. I never drifted close enough. You know how I get, around puddles, lakes, mirrors. I never drifted close enough to see if the woman's eyes were those of a sleepwalker finally waking, blinking slowly the way yours had when you first turned your gaze from my face to the one that wavered below. All I know, this woman was no victim of the undertow. Her steady fingers leapt from one wave she made to another, a slick ballet, her hands dedicated to her eyes and no one else's. Her sways weren't those of that step forward, step back, clenched hands dance we waltzed to in the woods, shrouded in the heavy shadows of trees that loomed over our heads. The day we fled that forest, together, to wade in the water, together, my trembling hand was laced in yours. Remember? My bare feet dragged along the sand until skin caught on the shards of a rocky ledge. It was then that I knew, you knew, no desperate, gentle words could coax those souls from the stinging embrace of dry land. You bit your lip only for a second, then corners of your mouth fighting gravity, you promised you could box step, pirouette, box step. You promised we could hold on. Even as one of us swelled forward, one of us held fast, feet on the edge, but eyes fixed on that forest full of hiding places. Once I saw a woman wading in the water, and she made me think of you. I never drifted close enough. You know how I get, around puddles, lakes, mirrors. I never drifted close enough to hear if the woman sobbed into that vast looking glass, or if those sobs collided with laughter, finally unfettered, into that same rippling symphony that long ago pleaded with my hand to let go of yours. All I know, winter is slinking nearer. Its loyal winds will warp this water into a solid thing, and thin blades will cloud that solid thing into a veil no floating face can rip through. These days are getting shorter, so I find myself wandering closer and closer to the shore, scouring for a sliver of whatever solace greeted you and the woman in the water. But this whatever, the tides don't carry it to the banks along with the smooth rocks and lone cattails, do they, darling? Perhaps that's why, sometimes, I glide right over that rocky ledge to dip just a toe into the water, cursing softly when it draws back, cursing softly as cool tears race to join the current, but I don't. Once I saw a woman wading in the water, and she made me think of you. Your shoulders rolling loose, your smile no longer faded as you gazed down, down, down at the glassy top of still water. Thank you so much, everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Molly. I felt we've been talking in the English department a little bit about how, we had such great momentum going with this event for like a decade. And this year with that 2-year gap from doing it live, it's been harder to generate some student interest and get students up here sharing their work. So we super appreciate all the students this year, especially who are doing this, probably it kind of feels like for the first time, seeing people up on stage sharing their work. And so, Molly, yeah, we appreciate it. And that was an awesome poem. Yeah, agreed. All right, let's get to our main event, so to speak. let me introduce our presenter and get her up here as quickly as possible to share with you. So today's presenter is an award-winning journalist and author who has written for USA Today, the Orlando Sentinel, the Chicago Tribune, and ESPN. Early in her career, she covered the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Florida State Seminoles. Later, here in Chicago, she covered the 90s-era Bulls, the World Series winning White Sox, 3 Cubs playoff teams, 2 Blackhawks championship teams, and the Bears. She has also covered the Olympic Games, the Final Four, college football bowl games, major tennis tournaments, and at least 1 major golf tournament. She has written a biography of former Cubs manager Lou Piniella, a book on life with the early 90s Chicago Bulls, and a memoir, State, this may be familiar to some of you, about her championship-winning basketball team in 1979 when she was a senior at Niles West. Currently, she teaches as a faculty member at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism. She is a journalism rock star, folks. Please welcome Melissa Isaacson.
Almost like I wrote that myself. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Okay. So everyone has a story, right? And here's the thing. Everyone in this room has the ability to tell that story. You need just one thing to be a great writer. So anybody want to yell it out, what you think that one thing, there's one thing that you need? Good, but not. You're getting there. Inspiration, okay. These aren't wrong answers, just not what I was thinking. Because you might not have inspiration. Well, you might not have the thing I picked either, but any other guesses? Pencil, you could do it with a pen, but yeah, that's good. Words. Imagination, you're getting close. Ideas, getting even closer. All right, curiosity. That's it. That's what you need. It doesn't seem that difficult, right? You really just need curiosity. And you might be seeing yourself, Writers Expo, and I'm here talking to you as a professional writer, that I have a lot of students who say the same thing. Even in journalism, they'll say, I'm really not a good writer. They'll come in with that sort of, thought in their heads that really defeats them before they even start. Maybe they want to be in broadcast, maybe they want to be behind the camera. Whatever they want, they'll say, I'm not really that good of a writer. But if you ask all the best writers in journalism, and I would probably ask most writers of all time, but I know in journalism, almost to a person, the great ones will say, I'm a much better reporter. But it all starts with that. It all starts with curiosity. All it takes is your eyes and your ears, the ability to talk to people, and even more importantly, the ability to listen, which is a tough one these days. It's kind of a lost commodity. I'm going to talk to you about everything through the prism of journalism because I'm a journalist and because that's what I teach. That's what I know, but also because everything in the world really goes through journalism. And I'll talk about that. But there are great stories right here all around you, in your classrooms, in the hallways, in your homes. Let me tell you a story about when I taught at DePaul before Northwestern. We paired off the first day, which I often do, and I have the students interview each other. And I said, just as if you were writing sort of a profile on your classmate. Is that me? No. I hope it's not. Sorry. Just interview each other as if you're telling their story without really having much background. Just go at it. And so, we had an odd number, so I had to be paired off with the student. And I could tell as I walked around before I talked to my student, sort of some just kind of, obvious questions, where'd you grow up and how many siblings did you have? My partner's name was Annalise, And I said to her right away, Annalise, that's a really pretty name. That's really interesting. Is there any meaning behind it? Any reason you think your parents named you Annalise? And she goes, well, my grandparents were both survivors of the Holocaust, and I was named for Anne Frank, whose real name was Annalise. And I told my students later, like, as a writer, you're like, oh, thank you, God. Of course, it's not a good thing. It's a horrible, tragic thing that her grandparents went through. They survived it. But as a writer, it's gold, right? It's like gold falling on you. But all it took was me saying, oh, that's an interesting name. And all of a sudden, I had this unbelievable story to tell that maybe she hadn't even told herself. So you may ask yourself, well, okay, so what do I have? Trust me, every single one of you has lived through, I don't have to trust me, you know this. You are living through an unprecedented time in history. As a teenager going through the pandemic, it's something that years from now you can tell people. More importantly, you can write about it. You can write about it now. Books will be written for years. Books will be written, and people will be interviewing kids or adults who were teenagers back then to get that experience, to get that feeling that no one else can know but you guys. Only you can know what it feels like to be a teenager going through what you went through. That's unbelievable. Don't minimize that. Trying to capture that story through your eyes when you could tell it yourself. So I'm gonna get back to that, but really, really urge you to think about that. You could be writing a book right now. You could sit down and write the first chapter of a book that maybe you finish in a couple years, maybe you finish in 50 years, but let me tell you, you all have a book inside of you. At the very least, you have stories inside of you that people will kill for one day. So I'll get back to it. But as a journalist, you can cover so many things, and that's what's one of the cool things about it, right? So you got science and religion and health and cops and courts and celebrity news, right? There's all kinds of stuff. You got business, big business. Our grandparents used to save newspapers, and through history, you know, Dewey beats Truman front pages, and from the Tribune, that was a famous headline. And President Kennedy, I once went through my parents' stuff and I found President Kennedy's assassination and the moon landing in their closet, like front pages of the Tribune. Throughout history, journalists have been chroniclers, right? The first witnesses to history. They've risked their lives and continue to risk their lives to tell stories and disasters and wars, to take photos of the bombed out hospitals and the schools in the Ukraine. You don't have to wonder if it's fake news or not. You have photos from New York Times photographers that are there that tell you that this is what's happening. Journalists, and I'm not just saying it because I am one, are heroes. I firmly believe that. I think they're heroic for the work they've been doing. You can write about politics. You can write about social justice. You could write about social justice in sports. That's a beat right now. There are beat writers at major papers that are covering social justice / sports because it's become such a major part of sports. I had this guy in my class last week on Thursday. His name's Neil Greenberg, not that guy with the beard, but the guy who wrote this. His beat is the Washington Post advanced analytics writer. How fun is that if you're somebody who likes that and he loves it and that's all he does is write about advanced analytics. You can write provocative stories for provocative magazines. You could write provocative headlines if you want. Oops, advanced a little too fast. You could cover fashion. You can write what we call service stories. Oops, sorry. During the long shut-in days of the pandemic, this was big stuff. How to bake stories, that was among the most popular. How-tos, always big. Reporters gave us vital, everyday information that we can use. It wasn't, Ernest Hemingway. It was important stuff, though. And they did it in all kinds of different ways. Stories that will improve our physical and mental health. When you're a sports writer like me, you may be finding yourself asking or saying stuff like, well, I'm not saving any lives, right? And then you realize that you have that power too, even as a sports writer. When a story comes to your attention like this one did to mine, the story of a Chicago boxer named Paco Rodriguez, who died in the ring, and whose decision with his wife shortly before he died to donate his organs would save the lives of 5 women who received his heart, lungs, liver, kidney, and pancreas. The woman who received his heart was a boxing fan who had gone to one of his fights in Philadelphia. It was an unbelievable story. And it also was a story that inspired people to become organ donors. We had a thing at the bottom of the story that allowed people to sign up to be organ donors. So even if one person did that and made a difference, if one person talked somebody else into it, and that one person, God forbid, was in an accident and didn't survive and gave their organ to someone and saved their life, indirectly a sports writer did that, had some impact. Obits are an interesting form of journalism, and I wrote many, many obits. There are the obits that are death notices. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about profiles. And they've produced some of the best journalism. If you ever get a chance to see, especially the New York Times have been famous over the years for their obits. That's not an obit. The next one's not an obit, but celebrity news. Profiles on celebrities are huge. You can write about famous people like Simone Biles, Caleb Dressel, Paige Beckers. How many of you guys saw Paige Beckers last week? How many of you, just show of hands, watched the NCAA women's basketball tournament? Okay, not as many as I would have hoped, but good. I mean, there were some really good games in the women's tournament, so don't, next time you get a chance to watch a women's basketball game, you know the Chicago Sky are the defending WNBA champs, right? And they start their season next month. You get a chance to go if you've never been to a women's basketball game. I digress, but go. You'll be really amazed. In person, the women's game really, it reaches heights that I don't think people realize when they're watching on TV. When you watch women and men on TV, you tend to compare how high did they jump, how fast do they run, and then you go see them in person and you realize how incredible they are. So if you get a chance, go to a Sky game. Anyway, there's stories like these. There's stories like these, more celebrity stories. You can also write about yourself. That's a really bad picture. I'm sorry about that. Looks like I'm from the Depression. But it all comes back to our curiosity and our dreams. As a child, my brothers got me interested in sports. Clearly, we didn't have a real basket. No, I'm kidding. We did have a basket, but somehow I was shooting into a big barrel. But sports quickly became something that was a passion, something that I loved. I didn't have a real outlet for it. This was the first time I ever had a uniform, which was shortly after Title IX in 1972. How many of you, anybody know why Title IX is being talked about right now? Yell it out if you know. Why is Title IX a big deal right now? Okay, well, it's the 50th anniversary, and Title IX in 1972 basically gave girls, sounds really simple, the opportunity in sports in any school or educational program funded by the government, equal opportunity as boys. The year after that picture was taken, the year after Title IX, was Battle of the Sexes, that was called, and that was when Billie Jean King beat Bobby Riggs. It was 1 year after Title IX passed, and I could tell you what I was wearing, where I was sitting. I could tell you how important it was for me to go to school the next day, having had Billie Jean, even beating a 50-year-old man, and Billie Jean was in her prime. It was a very, very big deal that she was able to beat a man. It gave women all over the country, and little girls like me, it really empowered us. The Watergate scandal inspired me and got me interested in journalism. So I had both these things going in the fall of 75 rather, when I got to Niles West High School in Skokie. That really looks like the olden days. But think about this. I know it seems long ago and that I'm ancient, but it's still relatively modern history, okay? We were not allowed in the boys' gym. In a suburban high school in a major metropolitan city like Chicago, girls were not allowed to practice or play in the main gym, which we called the boys' gym. 4 years later, we would win the third ever Illinois State Girls Basketball Championship and play to standing room only crowds in that very same gym where we are not allowed. And it's what inspired the book, which I'll talk about in a sec. But it planted the seeds for that. I'll get back to it again. Sorry, I'm kind of thumbing through notes. But what it did was it gave me the courage, to be a sports writer, to go to things like the Olympic Games in Rio, that was in 2017, to cover things like the British Open and more than 20 Wimbledons and all kinds of events. This was the Winter Olympics in Turin in 2006. It took me to a parking lot in Austria for the World Special Olympics Games. Anybody know who this is? I covered this for ESPN, the Special Olympics World Games. Very cool event. Anybody know who that is? Dikembe Mutombo, good one. He's the one, it was his idea that I take the picture. Sports writers in my day, we didn't do selfies, right? We didn't have the ability because we didn't have phones, but I think even if we did, we would never do that. We would never ask an athlete, and you still shouldn't, for an autograph when you're a journalist. You shouldn't take pictures with them. I interviewed him for a story, and he said, "Aren't you going to take a picture with me?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's okay." He's like, "Come on, you know you want to take this picture." And it's like, of course, one of my favorite pictures of all time. He's I want to say 7'2". I could be wrong. And I'm maybe 5'2". But journalism and sports writing, it took me to Super Bowls, many Super Bowls. This one included the Bears Super Bowl. And to cover this guy in his prime. Excuse for the Getty Images. Thank God it's Getty Images, which means I could use this for free. If it was something else, that would be bad. But we have the photographers' names, that's okay. I was blessed to cover Michael Jordan. There is no doubt about it. There's no other way to put it. Watching him every single night, 100 times a year when they were going to the playoffs was a thrill that even today is really kind of incredible to grasp and unbelievably exciting. I covered Jordan when he retired. I covered Jordan when he came back from his retirement. I covered him when he changed numbers when he came back from his retirement. How many of you know he was 23, but he was 45 for a short time? If you could find a 45 jersey, you'll be rich. I covered him when he led the Bulls to more NBA titles when he came back. And I was able to cover him when he got his jersey retired. And when he left once again, second retirement. Sports writing took me to World Series. It took me to Stanley Cups. It took me back to high school, where I realized that maybe the best story is the one that I had never written, that was there all along, just sort of waiting to be unearthed. Even then, while we were experiencing this, winning the third state championship ever in Illinois for girls, I think we had kind of a feeling that it was probably a pretty good story. And I liked writing back then, obviously. I didn't know I'd become a professional journalist, but I knew I liked writing. And I think even deep down, I felt like it was a story that was worth telling. I just was too stupid to write it down, to really do anything about it. And so it kind of sat there for 25 years. It began with the story of my parents and their battle with Alzheimer's for some 25 years that landed on the cover of the Chicago Tribune magazine in 2008. I realized, as it wound its way back, that my story really wasn't a basketball story at all. That I had to write it, but really what it was so much more. It was about a group of girls in that first blush right after Title IX, when girls in this country were not given access to the gym and to athletic uniforms. We had one set of uniforms. Imagine this if you guys play sports, any of you. We had one set of uniforms for the school, for girls, and every team had to borrow them. Every team had to share them. How gross is that? But it was also about people, this story, and it took me a while to realize that. It was about my teammates. It was about how basketball saved us from our insecurities, but also it saved us from abusive homes and family tragedies, and it gave us a chance to find ourselves. And it brought me back to that same gym 40 years later. The Today Show did a feature on us 2 years ago and reassembled our team in the gym, which was very, very cool at Niles West. It brought me back to my high school teammates, and it made me realize that one thing: I wish that I would have taken notes. I wish I would have kept a journal. I wish that I would have written anything down. I was very grateful for our memories. If you guys get together in 10 years from now, the memories will be there. You'll be able to tell stories, you'll laugh. It'll all be there for you. But how much better if you would have written it down? All these unbelievable things, this history that you're witnessing, if you only would write some things down, you'll be very, very grateful for it. I was grateful for the newspaper clippings I could find and even cassette tapes, but it's not the same. But what it did make me realize is that we had a story. And it wasn't really about winning the championship at all. It was about people, where every great story begins. The best writers are the best observers, the curious. Where do you guys begin? Look around you. Like I said before, the stories are everywhere. And the best writers don't concern themselves with flowery prose, but simply getting out of the way of a good story. So just jot down your thoughts. Write a chapter. There are important stories everywhere. There's beautiful stories everywhere. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. You have to read. See what you like. Decide what stories you're drawn to and why you're drawn to them. What is it about them? Is it the details? Is it the subject that they found themselves writing about? Or is it a great lead? Is it a great first paragraph that just engages you and pulls you into the story? More than likely, it's the story itself. It's a great reporter who collected those observations and those details and then just got out of the way of a really good story. It led me to a career that is unbelievable. I could not wish for a better career, getting up every day, covering Michael Jordan, teaching my students now at Northwestern. It's been unbelievably fun. I never thought I'd write a book, let alone 3. It's been really exciting. So I kind of went through it a little fast. I'd really like to answer questions, but I can also tell you some stories as well. And I never usually like PowerPoints, but I just wanted to share some cool photos with you. But I can go back to Jordan because I can. Well, let me tell you a story about this day first. So this was a day that, like I said, the Today Show came and wanted to film us. And the producer said to me, after seeing my book, and the producer said, we'd really like to get you guys to scrimmage. You know, we're 58 years old at the time. And of course, I said, oh yeah, absolutely, definitely, like for sure, yeah, we'll scrimmage. So I call my friend Connie, and she goes, are you crazy? This is a girl who went on to a full scholarship at Northwestern, who came this close to the 1984 Olympic team, but for a knee injury, my closest friend on the team. And she goes, Missy, I have no meniscus in my knees, okay? I'm not playing. I'm like, oh, stop being a baby. You'll just go back and forth. You won't go, you'll go side to side. You'll be fine. She's like, no, you don't get it. We're world champs, or we're state champs, damn it. And I am not gonna get out there like an old woman. Well, of course we did get out there, and we're throwing elbows. I wish I had some action shots. People came in high tops. I think people got taped. It was a sight to behold. 58-year-old women playing like it was a state championship. And that was us reenacting the picture that was earlier. Let's see if I can find it. You probably remember it. There we go. Same picture. Let's get back to another thing. So here I am about to write this, what I thought was just a column at this time. This was in 2004. It was the occasion of our 25th anniversary. And what I found out, which is so fun about, again, being a curious reporter, were all the things that I didn't know. So back then, you guys aren't going to be able to relate to this, I don't think. If you had neighbors who were getting divorced, you didn't necessarily know that, right? Your mom might say, like, so-and-so's getting divorced. Now you probably see it on Twitter before everyone else does. But no one talked about stuff that went on behind closed doors. It was so-and-so's sick, so-and-so's getting divorced. Whatever it was, they were secrets to us. So I knew that Connie had lost a sibling. I didn't know what her parents were going through. I knew that my friend Peggy's mother worked and that she didn't have a dad at home. I didn't know that her father was a schizophrenic and that they had a restraining order out on him and that her mother worked 3 jobs. I didn't know that Becky came from an abusive home. And so when I wrote this, I also didn't know that our principal at the time had 2 daughters. Who knew about your principal's family, right? It was like, he's just the guy that stands with his arms crossed and, a trench coat in the corner of the gym, looking kind of mean and scary. But what I didn't realize is that he had 2 daughters who were great athletes, and he used to go downstate as a member of the IHSA, the Illinois High School Association, and fight with these guys about letting girls have varsity competition, about allowing girls to have state championships. So first they allowed them to have golf as a state championship because it was sort of a feminine sport. It was a ladylike kind of sport, and they let badminton, and they let tennis, but not basketball because basketball's too rough. And basketball might take gym time from the boys. And he would come back grumbling to his colleagues or to his teachers at his school. I didn't know that. We didn't know that as kids. He called them the crew cuts downstate. I can't reason with the crew cuts, he would say. I found out all of that stuff. I found out that our coach at the time, Arlene Mulder, who was a very nice woman, no one else wanted the job. No one else wanted to be the basketball coach at the time. She was a good athlete as a kid. She was a country girl. She was what, we all called girl athletes as tomboys. We certainly didn't call them athletes. We certainly didn't call ourselves jocks. But she was one, but she didn't know how to coach. She didn't know much about the X's and O's. And so what I didn't know is that during free period, she was scheduling her free periods with the boys' basketball coach at the time, who was a legendary coach, who also happened to be a feminist. He didn't know that. He didn't call himself that. But he wanted us to succeed in a way that a lot of men at the school didn't. And so they would huddle in the corner of the teacher's lounge, and he would scribble X's and O's on napkins, and he would literally coach her to coach us. I didn't know that. That was a secret. 25 years later, I find out all of these things. I find out that the coach who eventually took us to the state championship after Mrs. Mulder, our first coach, became pregnant, went on maternity leave, we got the driver's ed teacher as our coach. He didn't want any part of it. I didn't know that, but he didn't want to coach girls. Well, 25 years later, as an adult, as a reporter, I gather all these stories, which is so cool because when do you have a chance, right, to go back and be like, oh, that's what was happening. And so it became this column in the Tribune, and it got a lot of attention. It went around the country. There was some talk about it becoming a TV series way back then. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever became of it. But somebody did approach me to write a book. And it took 15 years for the book to get published. And the reason it took so long, I wrote it probably in 3 months, but it was a basketball story. And what I learned, as I told you earlier, it became a people story. I talked about my parents and their first experiences, if you will, with Alzheimer's when I was in high school. Nobody knew that. I didn't tell anybody that. But I did when I wrote the book, all the stuff that we were all hiding. What's really interesting also, as you look back, and now we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of Title IX, which is the law that gave us the ability to play like this and play on teams. If you would have said to us as 17-year-olds, like you guys, if somebody would have came to us and said, you know, in 40 years, there's going to be a women's soccer team, and they're going to fill soccer stadiums all over the country with hundreds of thousands of men and women and children cheering them on. What would you think of that? If they would have said that to us at 17, we would have been like, well, yeah, of course, duh. And I'm going to be the coach of the Bulls. And my friend Shirley's going to be the owner, and Connie's going to be the GM. Like, are you kidding? In 40 years, when we're in our 50s, of course people are going to be cheering on soccer teams with women. But if you then would have said to us, yeah, but those same hundreds of thousands of fans, when that women's soccer team won the World Cup, would be chanting equal pay, equal pay. I think we would have been devastated as 17-year-olds, because as far as we had come from the early 70s, from the mid-70s when we weren't allowed in the gym, to winning a state championship and having a parade around the city and being on the Ray Rayner show, which none of you have heard of, maybe some teachers would, and go to the governor's house and all this cool stuff that we got to do. For all of that, we really haven't come such a long way. There was a cigarette brand called Virginia Slims back in the 60s, and their slogan was, "We've come a long way, baby," and that became the slogan for women in the 70s. We've come a long way, baby. And boy, did we think we've come a long way in 79. I thought anything was possible. And don't get me wrong, for the girls out there, anything is possible. But there's still a lot of things we're lagging on. The soccer team I talked about finally did win a court case for equal pay. And Venus Williams, thank God, the tennis player, got women in professional tennis to have equal money in Grand Slam tournaments. There have been incremental things, but we're still a long way, right? How many of you raised your hands if you saw the Instagram last year at the women's NCAA tournament with the really crummy weight room for the women? Yeah, see, it got around, right? And it was shocking. People were shocked that the women in the NCAA tournament got these terrible facilities. If you talk to women now in the tournament, they'll say, yeah, it's gotten a little better. Now they called it March Madness for both the men and the women. They had a better weight room. They have better food. If you may have noticed, a lot of times they would say the men's Final Four when they were talking about it on the broadcast instead of just the Final Four. They would distinguish. There's certain things, but I think if you asked a lot of women, they would say, still not really where we should be. So I hate to leave it on a downer, but it's not exactly a time to celebrate. I'm organizing a thing at Northwestern to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And originally we wanted to call it Title IX at 50, a celebration. And we hesitated and we're like, you know what? It's not. You have to be careful anyway calling it a celebration as if everybody's celebrating Title IX. It's not, you need to be inclusive. That's not the case. But even if it was just for women who had been in sports, it really isn't. It's more a time to pause, to look back, to look at current issues like transgender issues in sports, to look forward, to see about compliance, to consider what's going to happen for us, to consider that the ERA hasn't even passed, which is a whole different thing, but it's still kind of in the realm of gender equity. So there's lots and lots of things we can still be better at. But all in all, Title IX absolutely gave me sort of a life. It's why I called my book A Transformation. It made me have the courage to become a sports writer. It influenced the man that I chose me as my husband. It influenced the way we raised our kids. The man who co-authored Title IX, Birch Bayh, is a senator. He passed away a couple years ago. But I got the chance to interview him, which was really cool for my book. And at the end of our interview, I said, I have to say, I know you probably hear this all the time. I kind of fumbled and stumbled. I said, I have to thank you because you really actually made me and my teammates the women that we would become. What you did changed us. And he kind of paused, and I was really embarrassed. I thought I just sounded stupid. And he goes, no. That's what you hope when you get into a life of service, that you affect people's lives, and thank you. Thank you so much for saying that. And he later wrote me a note that I have framed in my office. So it's very profound to me, and I don't have any very profound way to end this other than let you ask questions. But thanks for letting me talk to you today. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Oh, okay. I meant to leave more time. I was thinking it was 9:40. Okay. Oh, God, come on. Of course, MJ. I mean, you know what? First of all, it's Chicago. I covered them. To me, there's no greater clutch player ever. I mean, I'm going on clutch. Yes, LeBron is gifted beyond belief, and I don't know who would win in a one-on-one of both players in their prime. Maybe LeBron would. But that doesn't make LeBron the better player. He didn't lift his team this year. I mean, that's not fair to completely judge him on that, but yeah. Thanks.